And welcome back, listeners and viewers, to another episode of the Unbreakable Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kait Dinunzio, and today I'm by myself. Normally, we would have either my producer, Josie, or we would have a guest with us. And I just thought this week I'd like to tackle a couple of listener questions and not just respond to those questions, but to find chapters in the book, Unbreakable, to relate them back to, because this book is all storytelling and it also has a lot of science and some things that you can be able to take away. So I'm recording in my home office, as you can see in my big comfy chair. And if I pan over here, you'll see my little dad shrine, some rocks and pictures, things like that. And then over here is a lot of different gifts and things. So you see this in the background quite often on the podcast. You'll see some awards and some trophies and some gifts, lots of artwork. And of course, you've got some things over here as well, some awards from bodybuilding shows and some recognition from work that I've done. So always love sharing and showing that stuff off. And what you might not have seen, and maybe you did see it up there, are just some really large gemstones. My dad was a rock hound, and so a lot of his collection made it to me. And then there's some really large pieces there that friends have gotten me. And so I love them, and it fits the vibe of my office in this personal space that I've built. So okay, so let's dive in. I have this one great question and a section in the book that I really want to read. And so I'm going to read two chapters today. One is a little shorter and one is a bit longer. And both of them are in direct response to listener questions. So the first question that I received is, how do I get out of survival mode when it feels like I've been here my whole life? Relationships, careers, life in general always feels like I'm having to fight. I can relate to that. I feel that. And I think there's a lot of people who are kind of sitting in that situation. We're in a very uncertain world right now. Things are kind of scary. And it makes it hard for you to visualize going into different places. So I'm going to read you a chapter out of Unbreakable, and I want you to listen and pull this in. So story time, chapter 18. The Resilience Blueprint. They say you don't know who you are until you've been pushed to the edge. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes when you're on that edge, it's not some great heroic moment of self-discovery. It's sleeping on a bus or humbly finding a place to wash your laundry, which was sometimes in the small sink of a public bathroom, before finding a place to hang it out while it air dries in the summer breeze. True story. I was homeless for almost 7 months. It's watching the most unbelievable, ridiculous scenes play out and thinking to yourself, how the hell did I end up here? If you get the audiobook, you'll get the extra stories behind that. I wasn't always an executive that flew business class around the world. In fact, my leadership journey quite literally began at the bottom, rock bottom. Picture a scrappy young Kait riding around the city of Calgary on a public bus on cool spring nights trying to find a place to stay because it was warmer and safer than the streets. At 20, I couch surfed between an unstable housing situation with friends like Chelsea and Jamie, crammed into spaces so tight and chaotic that privacy and stability were just pipe dreams. I was the working homeless during boom time in Calgary after leaving a relationship that became physically violent. In addition to this, I was also navigating a stage 1 cervical cancer diagnosis alone. It sounds tragic, but trust me, there's humor in survival mode. You either learn to laugh at the absurdity of your situation, or you sink under the weight of it. Gallows humor became my armor. If I could only find a punchline in a homeless night, I could find the strength to face the next day. One night, as I lay on the literal bench seat of a friend's old kitchen table, I looked over and saw Chelsea, who I had helped get off of hard drugs, passed out. And Jared, her best friend and roommate, was, let's just say that he was using her unconscious body as a makeshift bongo drum. It was weird. It was a totally weird situation. Nothing sexual, but just totally weird. In that moment, I did not think about leadership. I did not think about resilience. I thought, what the actual hell is my life right now? That moment stuck because years later, as I built my business, my career, and my personal brand, I realized that that moment was data, a snapshot of what survival mode does to a person. It makes you desperate, it makes you think small. It makes you tolerate things you would never tolerate if you believed that you had a choice. Most importantly, it teaches you to read people. When you've been in rooms like that, when you've had to navigate unsafe situations, you develop uncanny instincts about power, manipulation, and human behavior. You learn who is really in charge. Hint, it's not always the one talking the loudest. When you're being underestimated, and when someone is testing you. This is one of the most powerful leadership skills you can develop, because when you walk into a boardroom, a business deal, or an executive space, you've already played the game before. You've seen these dynamics at play in places where the stakes were much higher, and you know exactly how to respond. Living in survival mode shaped how I made decisions and viewed the world. When you don't know where you'll sleep next week, long-term planning is on the menu. The horizon of your planning shrinks to the next 24 hours. My thought patterns were all about minimizing immediate threats. Where can I stay tonight without getting assaulted or robbed? And seizing any scrap of opportunity. Who do I know that's got a couch free for a couple of days? And where can I do laundry? Growing up in poverty with early childhood trauma, I inherited a scarcity mindset without even realizing it. If you're always bracing for disaster, your brain starts filtering the world through a lens of fear and lack. It's like living in a perpetual firefight. You see every spark as a potential inferno. I got street smart and hypervigilant, which helped me survive, but it also meant I viewed everything as short-term and high stakes. This mindset kept me alive at the bottom. As I've grown, I learned it could hold me back when the fires weren't real anymore. One of the strangest challenges of being at the bottom was feeling like I lived multiple lives at once. I actually have a tattoo of a song lyric on my back, and it says, "I have lived so many lives, though I'm not old." And yes, I know it probably won't make sense when I'm old, but I'll be old. Who cares? I was a chameleon, shape-shifting to fit into whatever environment I found myself in. On the streets or crashing with friends, I was tough, guarded, and savvy. I had to be. At work, or during my volunteer work, I put on a polite, smiling facade, trying to seem like I had it together, when inside, I was anything but. I became an expert code switcher, juggling multiple versions of myself. In one setting, I'd crack jokes full of swear words and street slang. In another, I'd nod politely and say, "Yes, sir," like an altar girl. This fractured my authenticity. I constantly felt like a fraud, worrying that one world would collide with the other and expose me. To this day, I keep all of my social media separate for this reason. While at the core, I am who I am, different people have come in different contact with me in my life. I don't think there's maybe more than a handful of people who really know me in all forms of who I have been or who I am as a person. The irony is all of those versions of me were real. They were absolutely real. Just different facets developed for survival. At the time, it felt like I had to hide parts of who I was to navigate different social circles. It's a lonely feeling not being whole to anyone, anywhere. I was the friend with a secret, the employee with a double life, the sister and daughter with shameful secrets of violence and abuse, and never truly at ease. Only later did I realize that this identity splitting was teaching me adaptability and empathy, skills that would become assets in leadership. But in the moment, it just felt like emotional whiplash. I was everyone and no one all at once, and it would be years before I could reconcile those fragments into an authentic version of myself. Even now, I continue to gently mend all of these parts of me together, welcoming the full and beautiful mosaic of who I am to exist with joy and self-love. I'm a work in progress, and remind myself of that often, as the journey is the destination. There's no real end to growth and becoming who you want to be. And then there's some first threads in there, but you got to buy the book to get those first threads. So let's talk about it for a second. I've put some of my thoughts down, and, when I look at this period of my life, I refer to it as the dark years, and I've actually started referring to it less and less like the dark years because I don't want to disrespect that version of myself and who I was in those moments. I was learning, and learning is painful. But the point here is, when we get to it, I think we've all had points where we've been in survival mode. It doesn't feel like survival mode. It just feels like how we are and where we are. And so when we start to think about the fact that we're just waking up every day and running on the same hamster wheel, doing the same darn thing every day, that's one part of the problem. You know, being resilient means being willing to look at your triggers and at the things that you can control. There's a lot in this world we can't control, but there's a lot that we can. And so when we look at this and we just say, okay, so maybe it is a little bit of survival mode, but you control that. You control absolutely everything. This is a system that you work. And so you don't come out of that by waiting for something to happen. You come out of that by finding something to look forward to. I talk about it at length. I think we've got a ton of stuff on the Instagram page, Facebook, TikTok, wherever we've got socials, about the reticular activating system. And I say it all the time. We are what we say we are. If you think you're living in survival mode and that's what you're waking up telling yourself, then that's what you're going to see. The reticular activating system is a beautiful piece of your neurology that focuses only on what you want to focus on. And so if you wake up in the morning and you say to yourself, I am X, it's going to filter everything out that tells you that you're Y. And it's only going to focus on X. It doesn't know the difference between good and bad. It only knows what you focus on. And so my first piece of advice is to wake up and think about something that you're grateful for. And I know that, you get this woo-woo hippie shit where people are like, oh, just be positive and, have the attitude of gratitude. It works because what you're doing is you're waking up and you're focusing on something that you're grateful for. And if you're grateful for the fact that you might have a dozen eggs and some cooking spray, and that's all you have for breakfast, well, I don't have very much for breakfast. Or versus I have eggs for breakfast, I'm going to nourish my body with healthy fats and protein. Those are two very different mindsets, right? And so I'm not called Silver Lining Kait for no reason. It's because when we're going to solve problems, we want to find the first problem. We want to find the real problem. And sometimes the real problem starts inside of us. Finding your way out of homelessness, that is hard. There are many people who never come out of that. I just knew that I wasn't intended to stay homeless. And it was, a 6 month period of time. And it was uncomfortable and it was hard. And it was because there was no vacancy. There was absolutely zero vacancy in Calgary at the time. And I didn't know very many people. And sure, I could have gone home, but that wasn't what my path was. My path was to find my way forward. And it's not like I didn't try and use agencies. There were no agencies that were able to help. You can only get help if there's a place to go. And so I did what I had to do. And I couch surfed and I stayed with friends and I gave people rent money and I washed my laundry in sinks. And sometimes I had the opportunity to do it at the place I worked where I could have clean laundry and I could have some food. And, I had a lot of comforts. I was very fortunate in my homelessness because I was the working homeless. I was always clean. I always showed up. I had a bus pass. So people didn't look at me in a certain way because I didn't give them the permission to. And that's the other thing is when you want to become something better, you yourself have to put the time and energy into becoming that version of yourself. I can tell you that not everything that I have ever purchased is name brand. I am a constant troller of the dollar store. You don't need to have a ton of money to be able to present yourself well, to see yourself well. And I think that's the starting point. And, when it comes to careers, relationships, it really is all the same. We are what we say we are. If we are value-based people and we deserve the best, then that's what we get. And, let's be honest, there are different tiers to the best because as we grow and as we evolve as people, those standards change. And so my advice to you is keep trying, perform a little bit of mindset mastery, find a space where you can find gratitude, waking up 10 minutes earlier, doing it before bed. You don't have to just do it one time a day. In the moment, feel gratitude in the moment and focus your thoughts on what you want, not what you don't want. One of the things, right here beside my chair, I've got all my journals. I've got half a dozen filled journals. And I start with gratitude. I tell myself what I think about myself. I am loved. I am loved. I am a kind person. I'm a generous person. Sometimes I'm an impatient person, but I tell myself I'm more patient than I am because we are what we say we are, right? So take the time and invest in yourself. Invest in silence. Stay off of social media. Don't compare yourself to others. The journey is not the same for any two people. And I think that as we go through life, comparison truly is the thief of joy. It will take everything from you because our life paths are not the same. So I hope that helps you. And I hope that the chapter in Unbreakable helps you. And I'd love to hear from you again if you're open to sharing your thoughts. Don't hesitate. Okay, so we have a second listener question. And you know what's cool is I'm using these little cards as my bookmarks today. And this one says, I am strong and resilient. So I picked that one specifically for your question. The second question we have is, why do I keep choosing the same kinds of relationships or situations even when I know better? This is a great question. And I have a really great chapter for that one. This one comes out of section 3 of the book, The Science Behind How We Rise, or The Science of How We Rise. Gotta work this book in. And it is chapter 24. Allow me to sit back and adjust my glasses. Okay, so chapter 24, Practice Makes Pathways, the Power of Choice. Trauma doesn't always kick the door in. Sometimes it lets itself in quietly, wipes its feet on the mat, sits on your chest, and makes itself right at home. I used to think that trauma had to be loud, flashy, obvious, something that came with sirens or screaming or breaking glass. But trauma? No, trauma is more polite than that. It doesn't need a catastrophe to leave an impression. Sometimes it just hands you a plate of responsibilities at 6 and tells you not to drop it. When you do drop it, because you're 6, it tells you you are the problem. I didn't know I had trauma growing up. I thought I had standards. I thought I had grit. I thought I was just really good at managing everyone else's emotions, anticipating every need, and making myself small enough to keep the peace. Turns out that's not resilience. That's survival. And there's a big difference. Science backs this up, though science wasn't exactly invited to dinner when I was growing up. My nervous system was already fluent in the language of cortisol. Chronic stress changes your biology. It shrinks the hippocampus, wires the amygdala for threat, and teaches your brain that safety is a fantasy and hypervigilance is the rent you pay to exist. What does that look like in real life? Well, it looks like scanning the room for danger, even at your own birthday party. It looks like holding your breath in meetings and masking to meet the needs of others and calling it professionalism. It looks like saying, I'm fine, with a smile that doesn't reach your eyes. We wear our trauma like tailored suits, so custom fit, we forget we ever put them on. Some people have a story that starts with the day it happened. Mine starts with 1,000 tiny moments where nothing ever did. It was a hug that never came, the apology that never landed, the space I never got to take up, the feeling of always wanting to be more, not realizing that I was already a lot. Look, trauma is personal. What shuts one person down might not even register for someone else. We've all played the game of grief comparison. At least I didn't have it as bad as enter name. But trauma doesn't ask for credentials. It asks only one thing. Did it hurt? And did you carry it alone or in the company of other hurt people? If the answer is yes, that's enough. I carried mine like a backpack I didn't know I was wearing. Then, one day, it ripped open. Not in a grand breakdown or anything, or even anything cinematic. It was in small events, mid-boardroom, mid-relationship, mid-breath. And sometimes I felt myself standing in a pile of unprocessed fear, rage, grief, and exhaustion. These moments, as I reflect, were the beginning of the truth. Here's what I've learned. You can only white-knuckle your way through so much. Eventually, your nervous system calls your bluff. I wasn't healing because I didn't think I needed to. I was functioning. I was leading. I was succeeding. But I was also disassociating, overcommitting, people-pleasing, and confusing adrenaline with ambition, and then writing a Facebook post about it to share motivation. We've all been there. Come on. Anybody else cringe like crazy when their Facebook memories come up? Because I do. Let me say this, and let me say it loud. Listen to those of you who are in the back. Hustle culture is bullshit. Do I need to say it again? Hustle culture is bullshit. Through this, including the process of writing this book, it's taken therapy, honesty, and an uncomfortably long stare into the metaphorical mirror to admit I wasn't free. I was just functioning, but still captive to old patterns. So I got curious. I started asking questions I didn't really want the answers to. What did I learn to survive that no longer serves me? Where did I get the idea that love must be earned? Why did I feel guilty when I rested? What's the difference between being helpful and being afraid of being rejected? When those answers started arriving, sometimes in the form of my dreams, sometimes in journal entries, sometimes mid-workout when my muscles gave out, I made a choice. I decided to stop carrying what wasn't mine, to show up with the same energy that someone chose to give me, to stop overfunctioning for people who didn't ask me to stop keeping the peace when the war was inside me, to say what I was thinking and to do it with courage, conviction, and compassion, especially if the message served me and not the other party. Trauma didn't disappear. It was integrated. Think of it as being part of who you are. It stopped being the shadow that followed me and started being the soil that grew me. In that time, my leadership changed too. I no longer needed to lead to prove I mattered or that what I brought to the conversation was worthwhile. I do matter. And my expertise is very valuable and very effective. And I know that. And I say that with all confidence and conviction because it's true. I've got no doubt that a lot of leaders are trauma survivors. We're calm in chaos because chaos raised us. We're strategic under pressure because we were never given the luxury of reacting. But the best of us, the true unbreakable, aren't just managing trauma, we're metabolizing it. It doesn't matter the source, the depth, or the magnitude of the trauma, because again, that's personal. We've all felt the fire. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in these words, let me say this. You are not too much. You are not behind. You're just in process. The fact that you're still here, still trying, still showing up, that is resilience. That's leadership. That's what we carry, and more importantly, what we choose to release when it no longer serves the purpose we were intended to follow. The different peaks of who we are and how we become are unique to each of us. The journey is fruitful if you allow it to be. Everything is a choice. I think I said that in the last podcast. The brain is not a fixed structure. It's a feedback loop. It's a living learning system of electrical pathways and chemical habits, constantly reorganizing itself based on what we repeat. That's what neuroplasticity is, remember? Proof that change isn't just possible, it's physical, and yet most people assume they're stuck with the patterns they grew up with. When I first learned about neuroplasticity, it didn't feel revolutionary. It felt like a relief. You mean I can stop rehearsing pain? I can change my reactions, my reflexes, my emotional patterns, not by reading about it, but by doing something different? It explained so much about my own life. I wasn't born tough. I became tough. And every time I responded with kindness, when I wanted to cut out, or I held a boundary when my body screamed to fawn, I was laying down a new neural path. You can't think your way into a new life, but you can practice your way into one. Here's the problem with willpower. Most people rely on willpower and wonder why they relapse. Willpower isn't sustainable. It burns hot and fast. Practice is what rewires. Repetition is what remaps. That's why real growth feels awkward at first. You're building a new groove, and like carving a trail through tall grass, you must walk it over and over before it feels natural. Our brains are wired for efficiency, not accuracy. So, the more you rehearse an emotional reaction, defensiveness, shame, self-criticism, I'm looking at you, the more accessible it becomes. It's not personal, it's neurochemical. and one that your reticular activating system will pick up on quickly and hardwire even faster. I lived this for years. I confused conditional love with loyalty. I thought feedback was rejection. I still struggle with that. And I led like I needed to prove something to people who didn't even know my story. Until I didn't. From lamb to lion. There was a time when I was deeply uncomfortable with praise. I used to shrink under it, dodge it, or explain it away. I thought being liked was safer than being powerful. That was a survival mechanism. And yet, every time I said thank you without apologizing for my success, I was practicing a new pattern. There was a time when I overfunctioned in relationships, in teams, and in parenting, because I thought my worth was tied to my usefulness. Every time I paused instead of rescuing, I rewired that belief. Practice makes pathways. This isn't just something I teach, it's something I live. I've practiced asking for help. I've practiced leaving the room instead of exploding a lot. I've practiced seeing feedback as a gift, not a guillotine, and every single time my brain got better at it. The first time I stopped explaining myself in a boardroom, oh my God, my heart was pounding. The second time, my voice was steady. The third, I owned the space. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to repeat the right risk. The science behind the shift. Neuroplasticity works through pruning and reinforcement. When you stop using a thought pattern, the brain begins to let that connection atrophy. When you repeat a new one, the brain strengthens it, like a muscle. This is why trauma rewires the brain, but so does the effort around growing and healing. This is also why talking about change isn't enough. The doing is what delivers. It's in the pause and the breath before the feedback, the email you don't send, the praise you let land, and the truth you tell even when your voice shakes. Your brain doesn't care whether the pattern is healthy, only whether it is repeated. And further to that, the brain is a prediction mechanism. It looks at how you feel about something and it says, when I did this the last time, how did I feel? And it mirrors that feeling, right? You think about it. Your brain is in this dark skull. And so when you do something and you challenge that fear and you lay down that new neural path, you're going to hear and feel that internal dialogue and that pain. But the second, the third, the fourth time, it gets easier and easier and easier because that same reaction isn't the same every single time. And finally, the last part of this chapter, you don't need to burn it all down. People often think transformation means torching everything. I kind of did that. I have done that, probably multiple times. And it's in the book. That's performative and reactive. Resilience is quieter. It's cumulative. It's when you choose differently, not loudly, but consistently. That's what practice makes pathways really means. It's not an idea. It's an invitation to stop waiting until you're ready and start rehearsing who you want to be every day. Leadership? Practice. Kindness? Practice. We could use a lot of that. Practice it a lot, you guys. Practice kindness. We need it. Boundaries? Practice it. You can have boundaries. Self-worth? Practice. Invest in yourself. You are your greatest project ever. Rewrite the story and rehearse where you want to go. Your brain will follow and things will change. That was a great opportunity to share that piece of the book. I really like those chapters. They speak to me. And, so I'm going to take some more of my thoughts there. The patterns that we experience should have no shame to them. Our life experience is what it is. We can't look at it and have shame around everything that we are. They are familiarity. And so you have to make the decision as to whether you want to stay familiar with those things or not. Awareness is the first moment that you break the loop that you're in. Choice is the moment you don't go back. When I say everything is a choice, it is a choice. And there are chapters in this book, and they talk about, oh man, when I left a really toxic, unhealthy relationship, and the individual was trying really hard to manipulate me. And I had seen this person do this in a previous relationship just before we had connected. And I knew exactly what was happening. And it was one of the most scary things to not respond and not engage in that conversation, because I didn't know really what that person was capable of doing. And so I understand, like, in the relationship arena, I think for myself personally, I won't speak for anybody else. I know that I was trying to fill a void in who I was as a person. And a lot of that came from this, abandonment wound that I had, is that if I could make somebody happy, if I could make somebody want to be with me, if I could have the same interests as that person, they would fully accept me and nothing would ever change. And what I've come to realize is that the unhealed parts of ourselves invite the unhealed parts of other people. It's just that simple. And when you have people who don't know boundaries, they don't know respect, they don't know individuality, they expect you to be and give and do everything exactly as they would, those are red flags for me, because that's a person who lacks in self-confidence and security. I often say that, in my family, we all live very separate lives together. And it's wonderful because, it's important that we have individual identities in our home, but we as a family unit have an identity together. And, it's once you're aware of the pattern, you have the choice to break it. So I'm going to encourage whoever submitted this question to sit with that and think about the patterns that you see in the relationships that you're developing, and then ask yourself, almost do like a 5 why. Why is that type of personality attractive to me? Why is that person the type of person that I want to spend my time with? And then just keep asking yourself why, right? If you want somebody who's truly going to meet your needs, you have to be honest with yourself, and that person has to be honest with you. And so I'm just going to come back to your question. The question was, why do I keep choosing the same kinds of relationships or situations, even when I know better? And it's because that's all you know. And that is what is the better. And so you have to make a conscious decision to find a different method, a different way, a different situation, a different relationship. If something feels too familiar, chances are it's familiar. So pick up your copy. You can get this on Amazon. They will, oh, did you see that? I did like the little finger tap thing. Pick it up off of Amazon. I'm getting really fantastic feedback. And for those of you who've taken the time to personally message me, I really, really appreciate your feedback. I want it all. For those of you who are messaging me and seeing yourselves reflected in these pages, thank you. I love that you're seeing yourself in there. For those of you who are reaching out to let me know of personal impact and things that I've done to support and give you what you needed in the moments that you did, a lot of the time, I don't even know that I'm showing up for you. I just am. And I value the relationships that I have. I value the people who are supporting me with this project. And I value you listeners and viewers. It means a lot to be able to share this project together with you. And it's growing legs. We've got some new things that are in the hopper, the opportunity hopper right now. And so we invite you to just kind of stay tuned and keep watching. We've got some great guests coming up. And as always, please drop your questions below. Share your feedback. Let me know when you get the book. I'm just delighted by the response that I've received, and I'm really, really excited to continue sharing this journey with you and giving you what you need. In the meantime, remember, protect your peace, chase your dreams, and stay unbreakable.